It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
Wow, that was some dramatic music. Hey guys, happy Monday. Hey Druid, hey Robin. I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. Jill and I did a stitch and glitch on Saturday. If you missed it, it was just the usual stupid nonsense. But thank you, Druid. Yeah, I had a weekend. It always goes by way too fast. You guys know how it is. But I hope you had a good one. So I did a lot of sewing this weekend. I did some reading. In between a few things, I finished making Babraham this summer shirt. It is a snail pattern fabric from Heather Ross's Far Away line collection. It came out, it was quite a while ago. Definitely pre-pandemic, because early pandemic was sewing other things with this line. Anyway, hey Quiltish, it's been a while. Or maybe you've been here and I just haven't talked to you. But anyway, so Babraham has a new shirt, because I didn't have anything better to do. And then I finished the cushion for his chair. This was a little piece I had just pieced out of scraps. This is all that 70s and 80s fabric. Some of it's Eli Walker, some of it's probably Cranston, some of it's whatever. Sometimes you lurk. That is totally fine, Quiltish. So anyway, in his little chair, so he's all set for a little while. Got to get him some better pants though, because these corduroys are not cutting it for summer. I sweat looking at him. So, and I don't know if I showed you guys, I mentioned his hat. I need to find a way to make it stay on his head, because his head is too slick and his head's a little bit too big. But I mean, check that out. Is he not a dapper man in his little straw hat? All right. So, what do we have today? So, last night I was like, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? I thought, well, maybe I'll Google a few things. And, worst case, there's always, tons of ephemera to read, magazines, Joyce Gross's magazine. And all of the copies are out there on the Quilt Index. I was like, I have not tapped into those in a while, so I'm thinking. And then I had decided on something, and it was a symposium article from like 1991 by Questa Benberry, and it's in this series of symposium like books from, oh gosh, it's at the Union Historical Society. And I was all ready to read that. They have recently released them, I guess. I haven't been on the Quilt Index in a hot minute, so I don't want to say recently, but they have released all 4 of these symposium books on the Quilt Index. And I thought, I mean, I have hard copies of them. I bought them a while back, but, they're out there free. I thought, well, I could read these. So I had chosen that Questa Benberry one. I get to my desk, and I had forgotten. I got my fall issue of Piecework magazine, And if you don't subscribe to that and you like getting magazines, I really recommend Piecework. Certainly, they don't pay me to say it, but they're kind of one of those, like, I don't know, success stories, because the magazine's been around for a long time. And then the original editor, publisher, she ended up selling, or I guess releasing the rights to another company, magazine companies. And it eventually ended up with Interweave Press, which in the 2000s, early 2000s, even in the 2010s, I guess, was a great company, I guess. I don't know. Great, finger quotes, great. They owned a whole bunch of great creative and needlework magazines, including the Fons and Porter magazine, Piecework, and a number of quilting and sewing magazines. And of course, the Wall Street Bros messed all that up, and Interweave was defunct. They ended up, I think, selling out to, hey, Kate, also lurking. Totally fine to lurk, you guys, because you listen to me, right? Nobody wants to look at me. You just listen. And that's okay. That's why I'm here. So anyway, Piecework eventually, like, long story short, they were part of that whole Interweave, F&W, just crap story, where all this stuff just basically got, shit on and ruined. That's the best way I can say it. Well, of course, Fons and Porter, they suffered tremendously, in my opinion. And a lot of the magazines, they just shut them down. But Piecework, the original, I guess the lady who started Piecework, she came back around and was like, oh, hell no. And she started her own publishing company, Longtail Media, to take Piecework back. And I have to say, my mom subscribed to it in the 90s, I guess late 90s, for a year or so. And I remember reading it and thinking, I was in college and I was like, oh, this is interesting stuff. It's, it's historical stuff a lot of times. It's interesting stories. And I think it was a really great magazine. And then I feel like they declined under Interweave and F&W. I mean, again, pump cash into things and then the Wall Street Bros destroy it. But once Longtail Media took it back, I think it skyrocketed. The page count increased again. It had really dwindled. And so anyway, long story short, Piecework, it's been under Longtail Media now for, oh gosh, it's been at least 6 or 7 years, and I may even be underestimating that, but it's been a while. It was definitely a few years before the pandemic, at least. And they've released some books and stuff. And so anyway, the magazine's fantastic. Long story short. So a really wonderful thing that they have started doing, I guess it was during the pandemic, maybe, they kind of revamped some of their offerings. And what they do now when you subscribe is they will send you a digital copy, a PDF of the magazine, like, I guess once they mail everything out, then they do the digital copy. So I still haven't gotten my hard copy. It should be here in a few days. But I was scrolling through the digital copy and I see something I've never seen before and a name I'm not familiar with. And so to not keep you in suspense, it's the title, Mildred Johnstone. She was a needlepoint artist. And her work is very visually interesting. And so I was like, oh, maybe we can look at this real quick. Well, in the 20 minutes that I did some quick research just to see, like what's out there about this woman, I found enough stuff that I was like, okay, I'm sorry, Questa, we're going to have to look at your symposium paper later. Because this lady is interesting. And I've never heard of her before. And this is the wonderful thing about publications like Piecework is, researchers and just, enthusiast historians will have the stuff that they have researched and they've run across and they share it. And it's like, this is fantastic. I've never been exposed to this woman's artwork. And it's really almost in my backyard. So what I have to show you is a bunch of pictures of her work, which is really striking and interesting. And then I found there's a big chunk of her work is at the Allentown. What are they called? Let me find the right. There we go. It's the Allentown Art Museum. I knew it was something simple like that. And Allentown has her work for a very specific reason, which we will reveal in a moment. But as I'm looking, I find this paper called Mildred T. Johnston's Needlework Tapestries of Bethlehem Steel, A Less Traveled Road. So Bethlehem Steel was an important mid-Atlantic, East Coast, Pennsylvania / Maryland entity. They had, because Maryland to Baltimore is a major port, we also had steelworks. We had Bethlehem Steel here, but also in Allentown, in this coal mining region, like the southwestern part of Pennsylvania, and going into, like, it's close to West Virginia, going up into the mountains, so you've obviously got a lot of mining industry there. So this is why Bethlehem Steel is like a big mid-Atlantic thing, because you have the mining and you have the ports, and then you just have a lot of blue collar workers throughout. Bethlehem Steel's story in Baltimore is very sad. It was shut down. It created, a vast swath of horribleness for people that were longtime employees. It was really a blight on, Baltimore industry and such. And this is terrible. I don't remember the dates and stuff. I want to say Bethlehem Steel was in its ending days, possibly, when I first moved to Baltimore. The Digital Harbor was supposed to sort of be this big, like, the dot-com revolution was really supposed to sort of replace that, factory and blue collar decline. And of course we know how that went in the early 2000s. So anyway, long story short, Bethlehem Steel is kind of a big thing. But this woman, Mildred Johnstone, very enmeshed with Bethlehem Steel. And I don't know all the details yet, but that's why we do this, is so I can share this with you. And before I read this paper, and I think I digressed myself, but the paper is from the Textile Society of America Symposium Proceedings from 2002. And the Textile Society of America is a group that I keep looking at. I have not joined them. They're a little bit on the pricier side. And I do know some of their board members. They do a little bit of crossover, kind of in well, not probably more than a little bit, a crossover with American Quilt Study Group's membership. But I found this paper. It's online. It's part of Art and Digital, Art and Design Commons. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say it's gonna be okay that I read it online. But the author of this is Ruta T. Sliklis, I think I'm pronouncing her name right. And at one time, she was a curator at Allentown, at the Art Museum in 2002, when this paper was written. I looked her up real quick, and it looks like she's a freelance curator now, but she has written tons of stuff in textiles and fashion. So she seems like a really interesting person. So I'm looking forward to reading this to you. So before I get into reading this, let's look at her work, just so you know what I'm talking about when I say, like, whoa, this is so interesting looking. And at first I was like, I thought, at first glance, I would have been convinced it was a painting. But of course, because it was in piecework, I was like, what the heck are these? Are they quilts? Are they, needlepoint? What are they? So let me pull this up. So this is, no, I'm not cutting off too much of it. So this is one of her pieces. Let's see. Fearless Enthusiasm, The Life and Art of Remarkable Millie Johnstone. This was something just this year in March. They did a program about her. So it's really, and she just is fascinating. Like, she's into Buddhism, and she's went to a Quaker school growing up, and I think she's originally from, is she originally from, I guess she is originally from Pennsylvania. Well, we're going to find out. We're going to read about her. But look at this. This is so fascinating looking. And then, let's see, here's another one. This one is called, I think, is it Little Town of Bethlehem? So it's this Christmas themed thing. You've got these trees, and it says Mildred Johnstone stitched this unique tapestry after watching the lighting of Bethlehem Steel's company Christmas trees. So that's what you're looking at is, I mean, and Bethlehem Steel is like one of those like company town, like everybody was affiliated in some way. And, you know, they have, just like so many other types of factories and mills and things like this, they have like the little league teams, and they have, you know, the families that are involved in this are, you know, they're very tight-knit group. So I think that's what this is depicting. But all the way around it, you see, look at this. This is like steelwork stuff. There's some kind of like pulley thing, and like you have all this pipes and some like a chimney, a furnace chimney, I guess. And in the background, you can see like the steelworks, but it's about Christmas. Here's another one. This is from the Allentown Art Museum. This one I think I saw was a self-portrait, and when you look in here, you can see kind of the body. You see there's feet right here. If you can see my cursor, those are the feet, and you can see these sort of two mittens, and I suspect that like these sort of mitten hands, that's kind of like maybe a takeoff on the kind of gloves that steelworkers have to wear. You can imagine steelwork is dangerous. It's hot. You know, it's all these things. So, and you know, I mean, these could just be hands, but I kind of looked at it as, you know, she's in this steelwork environment. They look like those steelwork mittens. And then I thought this was a fantastic picture of her. Look at this. I don't know if this is in her home or what, but it's kind of rustic looking. It looks like it's kind of got some wood walls or something. And then this mantel here in this big open fireplace, just, I don't know, it just says rustic to me, but we don't see the rest of the room, so who knows. This is a piece up here above the mantelpiece that she created. I know I saw the name of it, but I'm not sure what it is. And then she's obviously working on a piece here in her lap, and she's got a parrot. She's looking at her parrot. I mean, what a sweet little picture. And she looks very young in this picture. You know, I don't know. I honestly don't know what her dates are. I don't know when she died, but she was active in the 30s and 40s. So this is, you know, mid-century. Well, here's what I was looking at real quick on the quilt index. These are if you go, real quick, I'm going to digress for a moment. If you go to ephemera on the quilt index, it takes you right to journals is the very first thing that it brings you to. And then these 4 journals here, these are the Union County Historical Society journals that I was going to read from today. We'll get back to it because actually Quest of Benberry's paper was really interesting, I think. So, yeah, we're going to get back to that. But in the meantime, if you have some time and you want to look at things, these were recently added. And then, of course, we have Quilter's Journal and so on, all the wonderful things. And then, so Ruta Soliklis, I looked her up. Like I said, it looks like she's a freelance curator right now. I suspect maybe she's... just based on dates of things, I suspect that she's probably, I don't want to say retired because I don't think she's that old, but, you know, probably in the point in her career where she's out there freelancing. So, all right. I think I'm going to put this one up because this is the one that Ruta used in the beginning of this paper. So, as I said, this is from the Digital Commons at University of Nebraska at Lincoln, you know, where lots of our quilt things are there. And as I said, this was for the Textile Society of America Symposium Proceedings 2002. And the title is Mildred T. Johnstone's Needlework Tapestries of Bethlehem Steel, A Less Traveled Road by Ruta T. Soliklis University of Wisconsin at Madison. And she is, let me see, I'll read this little bit about her. It said at the time, and again, this is 2002, she has a PhD, and it said she's the Kate Fowler Merrill Smith Curator of Textiles at the Allentown Art Museum. That was 2002, and like I said, she's not there anymore, but I would assume that she's maybe still involved. I don't know. Okay, so let us read this. Like I said, this is at the very top of her papers, this picture. This is called Alice in Wonderland of Steel, is the name of this. 1949, and it is in the collection of the Allentown Art Museum. The steel mills in Bethlehem are quiet now, but Mildred T. Johnstone's boldly colored needlepoint tapestries vividly remind us of their awesome power in the 1940s and 1950s. Far from being realistic, literal renderings, these abstract and highly textural interpretations use steelmaking as a metaphor for modern life. The machinery is larger than life, crackling and spewing out the molten steel used to construct oil rigs and skyscrapers. The people in the mill are very small. The anonymous steelworkers in masks, the artist as a bewildered Alice in Wonderland of steel. Mildred Johnstone's needle points are personal and spiritual. Her Buddha rising above the blast furnace. And this was, I saw this and I'm like, I don't know where I'm. This is a little person here, and you can see there's a little piece of people here, but I'm trying to see, like, what is rising from the blast furnace. I don't know. I don't see it. Maybe we'll learn more. Her Buddha rising above the blast furnace signals that no matter how deafening the machinery, spiritual beliefs can prevail, bestowing a semblance of calm in a fast-paced, dehumanized world. Mildred Johnstone received her artistic training from a variety of sources. In the early 1940s, she studied painting. Here's another painter who went into textile work. I love it. She studied painting at the Barnes Foundation near Philadelphia. Although she liked painting, she soon realized that her busy lifestyle did not lend itself to oil painting. Johnstone's second husband, William H. Johnstone, was a vice president in charge of financial and legal matters for Bethlehem Steel. Consequently, the Johnstones spent a great deal of time traveling within the United States and abroad on Bethlehem Steel business. In the 1930s and early 1940s, Millie, as she was known, created small decorative embroideries, monogram towels, ecclesiastic embroideries, and a wall hanging based on a Pennsylvania German design. These needlework projects, a hesitant first step in finding her artistic medium, kept her fingers busy during her travels, but they did not satisfy her aesthetic curiosity. The turning point in Johnstone's artistic career came in 1948, when on the invitation of her husband, she became the first woman to tour the Bethlehem Steelworks. 1948! First woman to tour, and my guess is there were no women working there. Maybe some secretaries or something. Awed by the power and grandeur of the place, she envisioned herself as Alice in Wonderland, growing smaller and smaller. And you know what? I'll stop right here to say, let me take back what I just said. 1948, we're coming out, a few years past World War II. Steelworking would have been booming business, both from the war effort and in post-war expansion. We've got all this like post-war money and people are, they're having lots of children and they're building stuff. So, the steel mills were quite busy. I don't really know about Bethlehem Steel prior to this time period, but my guess is women were working in there while men were at war. But bring us to the late 40s, early 50s. Women are back in the house, and Bethlehem Steel, I would assume, is an all-men enterprise. So, again, all guesses. I don't know. I could be totally wrong about all this. Okay. So she envisioned herself as Alice in Wonderland, growing smaller and smaller. When asked which elements of steelmaking she most responded to, she said, what an odd question to ask someone. Now, which element of this steelmaking do you think is fantastic? What do you respond to most? She said, "This is difficult to say. What you call the elements are something to be felt, not itemized. Perhaps one will be a giant hook silhouetted against the sky, another a hot metal car, or I may stop and photograph the web-like tracery of a catwalk atop a blast furnace." These visits provided Johnstone with the inspiration and material she needed for her needlepoint series on the theme of steelmaking. Throughout her lifetime, Johnstone successfully teamed up with collaborators who helped her render her fantastic visions into needlepoint masterpieces. In 1948 and 1949, while taking art classes at Muhlenberg College, Johnstone brought sculptor George Rickey, 1907 to 2002, to the steel plant to discuss her ideas for tapestries. Johnstone's first formal artistic collaboration occurred with the Chilean painter and muralist Pablo A. Burchard, 1919 to 1991, who exhibited his work in Chile and Washington, D.C. starting in 1942 and studied at Abraham Ratner's workshop at the New School for Social Research. Although the Allentown Art Museum has an extensive archive of letters and sketches from Johnstone, little remains from her collaboration with Burchard. According to Carmen Orrego Salas, a close friend of Johnstone and Burchard, Johnstone met Burchard in Chile in 1949. An updated newspaper clipping indicates that in 1949, Johnstone began acquiring photographs of steel plants from which she made collages. While aboard ship en route to Chile, she continued working on the collages, and when she arrived there, she met Pablo Burchard, who drew cartoons from the collages for her embroideries. So cartoons, if you're not familiar, cartoon is the technical term for a sketch you use to do a tapestry. And in this case, tapestry / needlework or needlepoint. So these are needlepoint tapestries versus woven tapestries. But either way, the cartoon is like what you're working from to do the work. And like with tapestries, like with woven tapestries, they'd actually hang the cartoon behind the weaving, and you'd weave based on, that picture behind it. My art school education did serve me for a few things. Surviving records indicate Johnstone and Burchard collaborated on 4 needlepoints in 1949. Little Town of Bethlehem, Alice in Wonderland of Steel, which we're looking at, Little Man, What Now, and Industrial Dollhouse. And so, let's see. This one is Little Town of Bethlehem. And let's see, where is the Industrial Dollhouse? Is this? I don't think I can zoom in here. It just doesn't have, this doesn't have like a zoom feature, I don't think. But you can see that this is like, this is by the water. And to me, this looks a little bit more, it's still very, not abstract, but representational, but this looks a little bit more like, she's kind of getting the specific shapes and activities around, this different machine. You see this guy down here is like pouring a molten crucible and you could see that like molten steel is then going in this, I don't know what this is. It's some sort of situation. Some sort of steelworking situation. But anyway, this one looks, I think, a little bit more, it's a little less representational, a little bit more specific. Burchard's gouache painting titled Araucanian Toys, I think that's right, Araucanian Toys, from 1949 is in the permanent collection of the Art Museum of the Americas in Washington, D.C. I think that has got a different title now. I can't remember. There's a whole bunch of that stuff that, some of it kind of recently got conglomerated. So I don't know if that's if it's a Smithsonian property, it's probably part of SAM now, the Smithsonian American Arts Museum. That's a guess. I'm not sure. Okay. A definite similarity in style is evident when the gouache is viewed in relation to the needle points Millie stitched that same year. In 1957, Johnstone exhibited her work in Santiago, Chile, Burchard's birthplace. The idea for Little Town of Bethlehem arose from watching William Johnstone test the lights on the steel company Christmas trees in front of the office building. In Millie's words, it was as though some magician had taken millions of sparks from the open hearth and sprinkled them over the branches. A warm and glowing moment, closeness of peace. At that moment, Johnstone decided to create a needlepoint of Christmas trees with furnaces silhouetted against the sky. The needlepoint featuring Millie as Alice in Wonderland of steel was her response to seeing the plant loaded with texture. Bricks, soot, rust, and vapor, and linear movements of catwalks, spiral stairs, and wire rope. So I'm wondering if that's like you've got these, that's a spiral staircase there, and then all these wires, I guess. Or maybe that's like steam, vapor coming out. The whole tangle of the mill is puzzlement made concrete. Johnstone exhibited Alice in a Wonderland of Steel in the Designer Craftsman USA exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum in 1950. Where it was awarded first prize by the American Craftsmen's Educational Council. And I think that's the American Craft Council now. Little Man Now What, the third needlepoint of the Steel series, depicts her husband as a diminutive lost soul. Now, this one's interesting because I'm not sure if they have this one. Ah, they do. Okay. So let's look at this one. Ah, so this must be, I'm guessing this is her husband here. As a diminutive lost soul. The inspiration for this also came to her on a tour of the steel mill. And this is a quote from her. Once, when I was walking away from a blast furnace shed, I looked back and saw one man silhouetted against the white vapor. In front of me was a giant office building. All of the offices on each floor were lighted, except one, my husband's office. 2 black spots, the little man and his place of work. Suddenly I felt his loneliness, so I put it into a needlepoint. Wow. I mean, you know, to have these images. So the light being off in her husband's office, and then seeing this man silhouetted against the vapor, and then this sense of loneliness she feels, and she interprets it into a needlepoint. Now, even if this thing was small, let's see, how big is it? Needlepoints take forever. Okay, 33 by 76. This thing is huge. It's like long and narrow. I mean, 76 inches. That's like 5 feet long, right? So yeah, that's, and you guys, I know I've told you guys before, like cross stitch, things like that I just don't have the patience. You know, and that's why I work small. But yeah, this kind of stuff, like, holy Moses. Can you imagine? And of course, I guess she's working with other people, but she's also doing a lot of this stitching herself. Like, oh my gosh. Whew. Industrial Dollhouse, the 4th Steel Series needlepoint, allowed Johnstone to apply feminine logic, in her words, to the steel industry. The scene is clean, orderly, and colorful. The design simultaneously shows the inside activity of the steel mill and its exterior towers and skyline in the manner of a cutaway dollhouse. So that was this one. Let's look at it again. And yeah, it does. It does look like a dollhouse, like the front of the building cut off. Johnstone was in the process of completing a 5th tapestry based on a Burchard design, Buddha in the blast furnace, when she came to Joseph Contini's art class at Muhlenberg College to seek advice on how to correct a problem she was having with the Buddha's face. Contini simplified the design, and Johnstone was able to achieve a serene Buddha. So let's look at that. I think I saw it here. Yeah, Buddha in the blast furnace. She also calls this Primitive Mysteries, or Buddha in the Blast Furnace. So, very interesting. I don't know what, if I didn't know what this was about, I don't know what I would make of this and looking at it. Yeah, very interesting. Thus began a fruitful collaboration with Joseph Cantini and a close relationship with his wife Margaret, a noted artist in her own right. Margaret and Millie often stitched together in the Cantini home, where Millie would enjoy the company of the Cantini children. Not only did Joe collaborate with Millie, Margaret Cantini also contributed ideas about color and design for the tapestries. In 1951, the art department at Muhlenberg College closed, and Cantini was suddenly unemployed. At Millie's request, Bill Johnstone secured him employment as artist in residence at the Bethlehem Steel Corporation, a position he held until his retirement. That's to get an artist in residence position with a company, a corporation, and it not be short term. That's crazy. That's really wild. Cantini was the chief designer and interior decorator for the Bethlehem Steel offices in Bethlehem and Washington, D.C. He designed furnishing fabrics, rugs, small sculptures, and dinnerware ornamented with his own interpretation of medieval alchemist symbols for the ingredients in steel. That's funny to say ingredients, because steel is an alloy. It is not a thing that gets dug out of the ground. All of the parts have to be mined, and then the reason we have blast furnaces is all that steel, all that stuff is mixed up to become the steel. I know you guys know this. So he designed furnishings, fabrics, and dinnerware ornamented with his own interpretation of medieval alchemist symbols and ingredients in steel. In addition, he made paintings of golfers at the Sauson, it's S-A-U-C-O-N, so Sauson Valley Country Club, the club for Bethlehem Steel executives, all the while continuing to design tapestries with Millie Johnstone. In the preparatory stages of a new collaborative project, Johnstone researched her subjects extensively and provided Cantini with books and photographic collages. I'm assuming it's Cantini. It's Cantieni. I wonder if that's Cantieni. Cantieni? Maybe that's right. Cantieni. With books and photographic collages as starting points for the designs. Cantieni compared the collaborative process with Johnstone to the making of an opera. Cantieni wrote the opera based on Millie's libretto. Millie performed the piece in brightly colored wool, angora, and metallic threads. One of their first projects was a tapestry titled Electric Arc Furnace, completed in 1952. Using a Bethlehem Steel photograph of an electric arc furnace, which looked to Johnstone like a ship tipped over by a storm, Cantieni first sketched the furnace on paper for Millie to approve, and then made a diazotype, or blueprint in reverse, blue lines on a white background. Millie worked with colored pencil on tracing paper placed over the diazotype to determine her colors. Once she was satisfied with the colors, she matched yarns to the colors of the sketch. Johnstone felt that certain colors and textures of yarn matched the sensations of steelmaking. She said, there was such a variety of yarns that just fit a steel mill. Fluorescent flash nylon for the spitting violence of an electric arc furnace and the burning crackle of scrap iron. Scotch heather for refractory brick. Metallic threads for French knots. Nuts and bolts and riveting. And let's see what there's other ones here. Allentown doesn't have everything. So, crud. Let me see if I can refresh this. Okay, just making sure that I'm actually still here because I guess Allentown is the problem. It's not loading. Let's see if I can go back to that. Okay, well, let's just look at this one. Sorry, guys. In 1952, Johnstone completed Pink Nude in a Black Ingot, her most personal reaction to the steel industry up to that time. I know I saw this one. I'm not sure if this was in the, this one might have been in the Piecework article. The inspiration for this tapestry came to her after a tour of Bethlehem Steel's strip mill. That's something different. One day I was in the strip mill, close to a procession of flat cars, each with its own glowing ingot. They wound in and about me with a ritual movement of priestesses offering themselves up to the white heat. When I asked why they lowered the ingots into the soaking pit, the foreman said to give them an even heat and make them more pliable for reshaping in the rolling mill. Well, what I can tell you is the reason that they go into a soaking pit is so that, you know, this was liquid metal, and then the ingot is still this insanely hot piece of metal, but it's solid now. And for it not to become immediately hardened, they have to slow the temperature down. And what they would do that, you know, the temperature loss, they do that in a pit of oil. I'm pretty sure what it is. She's just calling it a soaking pit, but I'm pretty sure it's a pit of oil. And it like, I don't want to say it slows down, but it evens out the heat loss. And so, because if you just drop a piece of heated metal into something cold, like cold water, you're going to have an explosion, first of all, but it's going to very rapidly cool it. And the same thing, you can do this with oil too. Also, rapid explosion, don't do that. It's bad, but you know, that's quenching the material, then hardens it. So, that's what she's talking about. Sorry, I just had to show off my my metalsmithing knowledge. Again, my college degree has... Okay. Millie found this to be symbolic of her life. She was being shaped by her husband's role in the steel industry, and she could either accept it or she could fear and reject it. By depicting herself as a nude, Millie showed that despite her vulnerability, she was ready to be rolled and shaped by life's events. Another tapestry on the same theme is Bride in a Blast Furnace. Yes, Drew, tempering, absolutely. Got the word right. Another tapestry on the same theme is Bride in a Blast Furnace. According to Johnstone, it is symbolic of burning off the dross of negative resistance. So she's like a real deep thinker here. She's like, and I guess, like, you know, because this paper is not getting super deep into it, but she studied Buddhism, and so I can kind of see some of her ideas are they're Buddhist ideas. French surrealist writer Anne Nin was so moved by Johnstone's Pink Nude in a Black Ingot that she wrote it in a diary entry made in the summer of 1956. I went to see the tapestries, and they were rich in color. They had the beauty of primitive paintings, a primitive looking for the first time at the machines and men at work. It was an extraordinary transposition, turning into decorative abstract motifs, all the various aspects of steelmaking. I was touched, too, by the human motivation. As an artist who has always been among artists, Millie entered a strange and foreign world. Instead of rejecting it as I might have, she espoused it by translating it into terms she could love and take pleasure in. She exposed its potential inspiration as design. Quilter says, these are very detailed tapestries. I wonder how long it took to make one. Exactly! I mean, just think about, like, I'm assuming most of you that are listening now have done some type of needlework. And, you know, I know embroidery, you know, simple decorative embroidery or cross stitch is kind of the entry level type of needlework, I think, just because it's you know, it's affordable to get started on those. And I think probably a lot of people like myself don't continue because it is so detailed, and it just takes so long to make each one of those little stitches. needlepoint's essentially the same thing. And I mean, how big these things were. You know, I mean, it's saying she's stitching with other people and she's getting a lot of help with the design aspect of it. I mean, is she getting help with the stitching? Is somebody else helping her? It's not saying here in this paper, but gosh, I don't know. It's pretty crazy. So Aninin finishes by saying, I thought it was a metaphor, an indication of how the modern world, rather than destroy the artist, could be used by him to his own ends. That is what Millie did. So here, I'm not going to switch over, but this is a picture of the pink nude on the ingot. And it's black and white because I printed off my computer. But yeah, it's interesting. And that one doesn't have a size. Let me see if... Oh, something bad happened. Well, okay. Now let's see if we can go back. All right, there we go. Let's see what we're looking for the pink nude. So it looks like the pink nude is not there. What about this? What was this other one? Bride in a Blast Furnace. I don't think they have that one either. Ah, here's Bride in a Blast Furnace. Okay, here we go. That's another really interesting. I mean, you know, again, without knowing, you know, if I did not have any context of this, I would look at it and say, like, this looks very dystopian. This looks like something out of Dune. But yeah, very interesting. Okay. Johnstone's most cherished acquaintances were artists, writers, dancers, and choreographers, including Martha Graham and Jerome Robbins. In the 1950s, Johnstone introduced Anaïs Nin to fiber artist Lenore Tawney. These are names we know. Another longtime friend. Through Tawney, Johnstone met ceramic artist Toshiko Takezu. And she also, there's another Japanese artist that I want to say it's another, I think it's Alice Kubasa. It's definitely another, actually, I want to say they have an object that she made for Alice Kagawa. She is also a Japanese ceramicist that Johnstone was friends with. Johnstone maintained a close relationship with furniture designer George Nakashima and his family. Nakashima's daughter, Mira, considered Mrs. Johnstone her godmother. The exhibition at the Allentown Art Museum features a needlepoint based on Mira Nakashima's childhood drawing. Millie's artistic acquaintances became an extended family to her. She felt more comfortable interacting with them than she did socializing with Bethlehem Steel executives and their wives. That is interesting. I mean, I'm assuming, let's look at her picture. I mean, she looks fairly, I don't know, average for the 40s and 50s, in my opinion. I mean, she looks like any woman out of the 40s and 50s, but my guess is she's kind of a bohemian. And she has this, you know, she has probably a different education and, I mean, interests than these executive wives. So I kind of understand that, wanting to hang out with the bohemian artist and not the executives. Millie Johnstone knew that her association with Bethlehem Steel opened windows of opportunity for her. Cantieni stated that Millie had the ability to see whomever she pleased. While Bill Johnstone was busy conducting business in Paris, Millie visited museums and artist studios. In the late 1940s, when the Johnstones found themselves in southern France, Millie managed to meet Picasso on a path near his home. Oh, just running into Picasso. Picasso invited Millie to tea and afterwards asked her to model Madame Matisse's exquisitely embroidered gowns. Well, that's a little creepy. If you were just, you know, sightseeing around Paris and a famous artist said, How about you model these gowns? You'd be like, get away from me, you perverted old man. Right, Druid? On another trip, Johnstone met with Marc Chagall in his Paris apartment. Let's hope he didn't undress her with his eyes too. I mean, she's a pretty woman from what I can tell from this picture. George Holton, Millie's firstborn son from her first marriage, put her in contact with the German fashion photographer Willy Maywald, who is best known for his photograph of Christian Dior's bar suit in 1947. Around 1952, Millie accompanied Maywald on a photo shoot at Picasso's studio, where she was photographed with Picasso and French painter Francois Gillot. Maywald also photographed the Johnstones in Morocco in December 1955, at which time Millie took a work in progress to the camel market in Marrakesh, immediately attracting a crowd of curious bystanders. An Arab man was interested in acquiring her lovely prayer rug. Through an interpreter, Johnstone stated that the piece was not yet finished. The man responded, "With Allah, nothing is ever finished. Allah knows." Maywald photographed Millie contemplating the 11th century Bayeux tapestry, which has been in the news lately, at the Musée de la Reine Mathilde in France. Millie felt a deep connection with Queen Matilda, who, along with her ladies-in-waiting, embroidered the exploits of Queen Matilda's husband, William the Conqueror, during the Norman conquest of England. In the photograph, Johnstone holds the tapestry titled Near and Far. The title for this piece came from the 1640 poem by John Taylor, In Praise of the Needle. Flowers, plants, and fishes, beasts, birds, flies, and bees, hills, dales, plains, pastures, skies, seas, rivers, trees. There is nothing near at hand or farthest sought, but with a needle may be shaped and wrought. So that's John Taylor, In Praise of the Needle. Millie rewrote the poem to reflect her experiences with the steel industry. Smokestacks, flames, and ingots, coke ovens, ladles, and cranes, hot metal cars, slag, sparks, tracks and chains. There is nothing near at hand or farthest sought, but with a needle may be shaped and wrought. Millie's version of the poem is inscribed on the tapestry. The image makes reference to English spot samplers, except that the typical flowers and insects have been replaced by flames, ladles, and cranes in the colors observed in a steel mill. It's not specifically saying which piece that she's talking about. In 1957, Johnstone worked on her largest tapestry, Landscape of Steel. In her correspondence with Joseph and Margaret Cantiani, she states that she wanted to make a needlepoint on the scale of the Bayeux tapestry. Oh my God, the Bayeux tapestry is huge. It measures over 70 meters long and 50 centimeters high. She never finished this depiction of her life over Highways and Byways, Millie's alternative title to the piece. The piece was so important to her and the design so complicated that she continued to work on it intermittently for the rest of her life. So I'm guessing it's so big that to answer the question, Tish, some of them took her entire life and she didn't even finish. In a letter written to Joseph Cantiani during the preparatory stages of the design, she explains, "I don't know why, but the landscape of steel keeps becoming more important, and the hand of God implication. Perhaps that hand is weaving a more logical design, because the threads of reality are having clearer colors. A landscape is a view, something time looks on and into. We decided on a long shake, the long view. Perhaps the need to take the long view of things, of our life and ourselves in it, was the beginning, the urge." Pain and anxiety are evident in Johnstone's choice of images and the words surrounding them. Black Angus cattle graze by the word anxiety. In tape-recorded interviews, Cantiani explained that Black Angus cattle were kept on the grounds of the country club to provide fresh steaks for Bethlehem Steel executives. Oh my God. You know, Bethlehem Steel itself, I think, is a very, it's a very, like, it's kind of the story of, like, the social class. You know, you've got these just executives that have a golf club where they keep cattle so that they can have steaks. I mean, this is crazy. Oh, okay. This next thing is interesting, and I heard about this too, and it's horrifying. So, in her tapestry, Johnstone registers her concern for the cattle. And, I mean, she's a Buddhist. Like, she has Buddhist training, so you can understand that. A gray wolf stands by the word crisis in reference to the tragedy that occurred in 1927, when a wolf killed her infant son. Now, this doesn't... The paper's not providing additional information here, but what I can tell you is it is random and weird that a wolf killed her child. Yes, it is horrible. He was 2 years old when it happened. It says here he was an infant, but he was 2 years old. And the wolf escaped from her first son's private zoo. I mean, her first husband, the man before Bill Johnstone, had a private zoo. I don't know anything about who this man was, but apparently the wolf escaped and killed her child, mauled the baby. So that's horrible. So, you know, she's not without some tragedy in her life. I mean, she's a rich woman at this point, but yeah, I mean, I feel bad for her. In contrast, other images celebrate the accomplishments of the steel industry, including the San Francisco Bridge, the Empire State Building, oil wells and refineries, all made with Bethlehem steel. And I would say that's probably also a point of pride to her, that her husband is, you know, an important executive with this company that is building America. In 1960, Johnstone completed The Peaceable Kingdom, in which she makes a more direct reference to her son's death. In this tapestry, Bethlehem Steel executives are shown seated at a table, just as the apostles were at the Last Supper. Millie alludes to the growing problems in the steel industry at this time. I'm working on the peaceable kingdom in more ways than one. Sewing the men behind the table, each one brings a new laugh. I've ripped the chairman of the board out 3 times, and he still keeps a frightened look. Okay, so not only is she stitching these things, she's also unstitching them when she doesn't like what she stitched. Of course, they all have plenty to be frightened about: age and health and international complications. So my guess is, like, the writing was on the wall at this point, in the 60s. I mean, we're looking at, I guess, Chinese steel is becoming maybe a potential disruptor in, you know, this industry we have in the U.S. In the industry, the day-to-day lives of executives were far removed from the noise, soot, and smell of steelmaking. According to Millie, the men at the table were alone with the risks of decision. In the background, Millie stitched skyscrapers and oil rigs in her unique interpretation of paradise. The foreground contains a peaceable kingdom a la Edward Hicks. The small child leading the wolf and the lamb is her second son, Tommy. The following verse from Isaiah is inscribed near the bottom. The wolf also shall lie down with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion together, and a little child shall leave them. Isaiah 11:6. So I think, was this one of them? No. Okay. Johnstone's firstborn son, George Holton. Okay, so Holton is her ex-husband, her first husband's name. So George became a well-accomplished travel photographer. Millie used some of his photographs as source material for her later needlepoint tapestries. Johnstone's family mandala was based on Holton's photograph of a white stucco church in Mykonos, Greece. At this time, Johnstone's interest in Eastern philosophy, namely Zen Buddhism and the Japanese tea ceremony, was growing, and she had no qualms about combining Christian and Buddhist iconography in a single work. In 1963, Johnstone took a tour of Japan led by Alan Watts. So Alan Watts was a major U.S. he brought Zen Buddhism basically to the U.S. Like, he was a major American integrator of that form of Buddhism in the U.S. So he was responsible for bringing the Japanese tea ceremony to the United States. In Japan, Johnstone met Hisashi Yamada, a Japanese tea master who came to the U.S. in 1964 to be the narrator of the tea ceremony at the World's Fair in New York. Johnstone narrated the tea ceremony with Yamada, and the two became close friends. In the late 1960s, Yamada opened and ran the New York branch of Urasenki Incorporated, the Japanese tea ceremony school. Well, that's interesting, a tea ceremony school. If you've never read about the Japanese tea ceremony, it is very involved. There's all of this very ritualistic type of actions that are made with, like, all of the accoutrement that's related to tea ceremonies. I mean, there's a whisk and there's a spoon and a ladle and all this kind of stuff. It's very, very, it's lovely, but it's very ritual and ceremonial. On March 2nd, 1975, Millie Johnstone was featured in the New York Times, Fashions of the Times. In one of the photographs, Johnstone and Yamada performed the tea ceremony in the Johnstones' 22nd floor apartment in New York City. In another, Millie is shown with her tea mandala, a work in progress. Yamada inherited this mandala, which he considers her masterpiece. Once inspired by life in the steel mill, Johnstone now conceived her ideas through quiet introspection and meditation. Regarding the tea mandala, she said, "I have a very special needlepoint in my head. A mandala, circles within circles, like the wheels of life, round and round, for I feel a roundness to my life, a wheel-like rhythm, and I want to stitch it all." During this new stage of Johnstone's life, Joseph and Margaret Cantiani continued to transform Johnstone's ideas into visual form. And I think this is what we're talking about here. So this is, what did they call this? Preparatory drawing for, yes, this is the tea mandala. So this is what Joseph Cantiani drew for her. Very interesting. I mean, it's like, this is such a departure from the Bethlehem steel pieces. I mean, this is so, like, a symmetry and just very, very beautiful. During this new stage of Johnstone's life, okay, so Joseph Cantiani. In 1979, George Holton died in his sleep while leading a Lindblad travel tour in China. Millie dealt with this tragedy by making another family mandala, one with family members radiating outward from a circle in the form of a camera lens. Millie covers her eyes because she cannot deal with the pain. George holds a camera. The wolf and the lamb oppose one another. Oh, wow. I mean, like, what grief this poor woman must have felt. Having lost both of her boys. And I don't know, it doesn't say she had any other children, so this might have been both of her, might have been it. So Millie stitched one last tapestry based on a photograph George Holton had taken of the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center, an especially haunting image in light of the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. The shadow of a bird flying downward is cast on one of the towers, and the silhouette of St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church appears at the bottom. The Johnstones were particularly interested in the Twin Towers because they were built with Bethlehem steel, and they could be seen from their 22nd floor apartment in the United Nations Plaza. Millie enlisted the help of Joe and Margaret Cantiani with the design, and she insisted that the background be in the spectrum of hot colors observed in steelmaking. To the viewer observing this tapestry today, the bird looks like an airplane and the towers appear to be on fire. Wow. We'll have to look for that one. Okay. In the 1970s, Johnstone's fascination with Zen Buddhism and Japanese tea rituals inspired her to stitch a series of calligraphic needlepoints in Japanese characters. So I know we have one of those too here. That's this. For these, she collaborated with Reverend Ido Shimano Roshi, now abbot of the Zen Studies Society in New York. Roshi met Bill and Millie Johnstone in the early 1970s. He describes his impression of the Johnstones. Millie was always so youthful, while Bill was so grounded and broad-minded. While I was struggling as a young monk to establish a Buddhist monastery in New York State, I consulted him. Millie made tea for us. After hearing my long explanation, Bill said, "If you want to have a comfortable life, forget it. But if you want to have a meaningful life, do it. I will help you." After retiring from Bethlehem Steel, Bill Johnstone put all of his energy into the construction of the Daibosatsu Zendo Kongoji, a mountain monastery in Livingston Manor, New York, which opened on July 4th, 1976, on the bicentennial. That's wild. Roshi remained a spiritual advisor to the Johnstones for the remainder of their lives. Bill and Millie spent a great deal of time meditating at the Zendo. Although Millie was stitching less at this stage of her life, she completed about a dozen calligraphic needlepoints in Japanese characters, which Roshi had drawn for her on the canvas. She created needlepoints of the Zen names given to her and her husband by Roshi. Bill's Dharma name, which translates to spiritual stone, was stitched in black on an orange and gray background. Millie's Dharma name, reflective mirror, was done in green on a blue background. In art, as in life, Bill and Millie complemented each other. A needlepoint titled Namu Cha, which means devotion to tea, also sums up an important aspect of Millie's life. The title for a third needlepoint, Dokuzu Dai Uho, is taken from a famous Zen phrase, "I sit alone on this sublime peak." If Millie were to sit alone on a sublime peak, she would be stitching a needlepoint. For most of her life, though, Millie was not alone. She surrounded herself with friends who nourished her creative spirit. Joe and Margaret Cantiani collaborated with her until her death in 1988. The exhibition at the Allentown Art Museum is the first to acknowledge the tremendous role the Cantianis played in the creation of these tapestries, and it seems fitting to end with Millie's personal reflection of their relationship. Dear Joe, I've been viewing steel for a long time, from the outside in and from the inside out. In the process, are you and Margaret doing what Paul Klee says art does, make visible. Through your wordless understanding, through what you are, plus your own rare talent, you are making visible a long sequence of concealed events. Remember what Emerson says on that. The secret of the whole world is the tie between person and event. The same contains the event that shall befall it. Besides Bill, besides the event of you and Margaret and the boys, there was the event of little Tommy and the wolf, that tie unraveling like a tangled thread. The invisible made real at the time of the accident overshadowed the ugly and specific facts. Through you, that invisible is being made visible, the whole process of needlepoints. In that process, the wolf within has been tamed, a treaty made. A treaty not with a certain wolf, but with some wolf-like characteristics related to big business, to authority, officialdom, compartments, and departments. Gosh, she probably really wasn't liked by the other executive wives. She's got a little bit of, that air about her that she's a little, as much as she's looked at and sort of, I guess, her take on the steel industry is as this observer, but she is influencing, she's adding in her own emotional influences, but it seems to me that she's also a critic, and so I think that might make her a little bit of a divisive figure. Yeah, Robin, she's a bit eccentric. I would say that. Yeah, I think all artists are a little bit eccentric. Gradually through and by the process of sewing, working to unite and blend, I was allowed to discover the hostility attached to steel business, to industry, and an executive drive, that hostility was in me and my fear of aggression, which made me aggressive. Through your aesthetic vision, your perception and sensibility, I've been able to look at this personal landscape of steel detachedly and fall into its mysterious myth. Good night and thank you. Love, Millie. And then this postscript says, the Allentown Art Museum is the proud repository of 10 needlepoint tapestries from the Steel series. 8 of them were presented to the museum by the Johnstones in 1976 and exhibited at the museum in 1978. 2 others were given by Margaret Cantieni in 2001. In 1992, Joseph Cantieni donated 19 of his drawings for the tapestries. Margaret donated a furnishing fabric called Shipyards, designed for Joe for Bethlehem Steel. Millie's family and friends have been tremendously helpful with this project. I would like to especially acknowledge the Lenore G. Tawney Foundation and Margaret Buchholz for providing funding for this project. So again, that was Ruta T. Salakis, PhD. I think that was a lovely paper. I really very much enjoyed reading about Millie. Mildred. Yeah, Kate says not a beneficiary. Yeah, I'm assuming you mean that as kind of like the being an executive wife. And looking at this, I mean, look at this. And so this must be a smaller piece because you can see the needle, the stitches. But can you imagine? I mean, I could probably stitch the characters, right? I could not even begin to stitch all of that same color across the back. I mean, you really have to enjoy that, just stitching and stitching. I mean, and yes, her wealth gave her access and opportunity. Absolutely. And that's one of those things, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword to be, your wealth brings you to brings you these wonderful things and brings you in contact with wonderful things. But, your ideals, your artistic ideals might be in conflict with that. I'm sure it's a tough place to be. I mean, it's a place I frankly would love to be. I mean, I'll be honest. So, it's unfortunate that we can't zoom into this, but this is big. Let's see what the size of these. So this one's 22 by 94.5 inches. I mean, that is so long. So linen plain weave with wool French knots and stem stitch embroidery. Okay, so this isn't even a needlepoint. This is an embroidery. Wow. Blast furnace against a gray sky. Oh, wow. This is actually very similar to a friend's work, who's a painter, who does some work very much like this. Although, I mean, I think you can see the steel mill in here. Wow, that's really interesting. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and drop that. Oh. I don't know why my stream chat never wants to let me drop stuff in. Yeah, Robin, I think what you and Kate are kind of saying is the same thing. I mean, like, she lived in a time where, I guess the point I was making at the beginning is kind of like the steel mills. I mean, women, I guess, had to work in those factory settings during the war, but post-war, we go back to this. I don't even want to say we go back to anything. We end up in this new place where women are back in the home, but it's different than how women were in the home before the war. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was her wealth that gave her opportunity and allowed her, to do this. And I guess you have to appreciate the fact that she had the opportunity to do this, and we have the ability to look at them, because they really are beautiful. Oh, here's electric arc furnace. This is one that I know was mentioned. Oh, look. So I think this is these neon lines. Remember she mentioned that? The neon lines of the arcs. I bet that's what that is. And I wonder what this is. It almost looks like a elephant's head. Yeah, and I guess that's the blast in there, the blast furnace. So fascinating. You know, and again, like out of context, these things are very abstract. You know, like they're just, you know, once you know what they're about, obviously, you know, you can make sense of them. But so this one, oh yeah, this one's really interesting too. I wish we could zoom in and see like the texture here to see what those stitches actually look like. Because I mean, this almost looks like this green part here from, you know, from what I can see on my screen, it's got like a tweed look to it. So I'm wondering if, you know, I mean, did she do like a tweed type, like a stitching that looks like tweed? I'm guessing yes, because it doesn't say that she worked with anything other than the wool threads or, you know, the Angora threads or whatever. So she had to have stitched this. But to me, this looks like a tweed piece of wool fabric that, you know, was appliqued down, but I'm certain it wasn't. So let's see, how big is this? 33 by 25 inches. Girlfriend was stitching a lot. Let's see, let's real quick look at this. Okay, 17 by 10. Okay, so this one's like an okay size. I still, even at 17 inches, 17 by 10 inches, I mean, 10 inches is that big. I mean, that's the width of it. So, you know, it's bigger. It's, yeah, I couldn't have done all that stitching. Yeah, quilters. I would say on that other one, yeah, I'm sure that's what she chose to do. You know, she had like, I mean, I feel like these things are very intentionally designed. And she's using certain stitches. And I mean, in embroidery, obviously we have all kinds of different types of stitches. This when you're in a needle point application of embroidery, I think you limit the number of stitches you use a little bit more to some degree. And then there's some needlepoint stitches that are not necessarily used extensively in embroidery because they're based on like the count, like almost like a counted needlework, and that's what needlepoint is. It's counted work. So yeah, I mean, all of these are really interesting pieces. So I mean, you can see why as I just happened to scroll through piecework because it was open on my, here I can show you. That picture was in piecework. You can see I'm not gonna violate copyrights, but yeah, all these pictures are in Piecework magazine, and I literally had gone to the front page of it, and I was like, huh, and I scrolled through, and then all of a sudden I saw those pictures, and I was like, what am I looking at? This looks so fascinating. What is this? So I'm glad I did that today. So I hope you guys have enjoyed that, and let me scoot back here and I'll give you some links because it was not letting me put them in the chat there, and I hate that. So if you want to look at these more carefully, this is the link, the search link. So that was my search link to the Allentown Art Museum. And uh-oh, what did I do? I had the link to this paper. Let me try this again. Okay, here we go. So this is the download of Ruta Soliklis's paper. Too many tabs. Okay, so there's the paper that I just read, and much appreciation for Ruta Soliklis, because that was such a good paper. Yeah. So, and I mean, Poor Millie. I mean, I just go back to like losing her sons. And at least her husband or son George made it to adulthood. Okay. You know what we're at next, and I have some limited time here. That paper took longer than I expected. Okay, here we go. There's that. And there's that. And we're back to our book. So, as a reminder, we are reading The Secret of the Crazy Quilt by Florence Hightower. It was written in 1972. It is a young adult book. I'm not going to do any more summaries because we've gotten quite a bit into the book and there's all kinds of things going on. But there's a secret about this crazy quilt. So, where we left off, it is the day that Cousin Harriet and Mary, Cousin Harriet's granddaughter, come to visit, and our main character Jerusha does not like Mary, didn't like her a whole lot before, really hates her now because she's become this like horrible little teenager. This is 1926, by the way. So we are now going to pick up with the narrative of Braun, who you know is somebody important to this family, and he hasn't been around, and we don't know why. So, here we go. The Secret of the Crazy Quilt by Florence Hightower. Braun. The silence after Cousin Harriet was very sweet. I went on leaning out my window, breathing in the sunlight and the familiar Sewell fragrances. Remember, Sewell, Massachusetts. Sewell fragrances which I loved. Freshness of flowers, arbor vitae, and a salty moistness from the sea. Gradually, peace of mind returned to me. I even felt a faint, very faint, sympathy for Mary. How could anyone be decent with a grandmother like hers? Auntie, Auntie, come look. We've got scads of clams. It was Freddie's voice. Freddie and Braun were coming up the drive together. Braun was carrying the clam hooks and basket. His hands and hip boots were all muddy, but his face was clean and tanned and smiling, and his hair shone like gold in the sunlight. He threw back his head and laughed. Hey, Edie, come see. He held out the clam basket. How's that for Freddie's first morning's work? Aunt Edith was walking down the drive to meet them. She looked into the clam basket. Good for you, Freddie, she cried. You've got so many, we can all have some for lunch. She patted Freddie's head and laughed. She looked at Braun. It's been a long time since we've seen you. I was beginning to think you were avoiding us. She didn't sound happy anymore. She sounded like a schoolteacher. Braun smiled down at her. Don't be silly, Edie. Of course I was not avoiding you. The season started. Irene and I are busy. May I stay for lunch? Irene is his boat. Remember that he takes the summer people out on the water. Don't you be silly. Of course you can, said Aunt Edith. The three of them came up from the driveway. Where's Jerry? Asked Braun. I hear she had to stay home and do her duty by Mary. I wanted to shout, I'm here, and raced down to hug him. But suddenly I felt shaky and shy. He and the others passed on toward the back of the shed where they would hose off the clams. I ran to my mirror and examined my face. I did look awfully wholesome. Would Dagmar Cosmetics bring out some hidden allure in these round blue eyes? Or make my nose less pug? Or cover my freckles with the creamy luster of magnolia petals? I doubted it. I brushed my hair. Before I went downstairs, I stopped in the bathroom to wash my face and hands and brush my teeth. My heart was thumping, and I was actually trembling as I rounded the back of the shed and presented myself to Braun. He jumped up beside the wash tub where he was squatting and scrubbing clams. He smothered me in a bear hug and then swung me around so my feet flew up in the air. At last, he cried, and held me off at arm's length, as Grandpa had, to get a good look at me. You've grown, he said, but you're still the same, still my dear old Jerry. It's great to have you back. It's great to be back, I said, full of happiness. We kept hoping you would come down and help us. Mary must have talked your ear off. She did, I said, and I wanted to get away, but she was my guest, and I had to be polite. Braun laughed. You're a real lady, Jerry, and you have a look of your grandmother about you that would make me love you even if I didn't love you anyway. Oh, Braun, I cried. I thought I might burst with happiness. When you didn't come to help with the clams, I was afraid that maybe over the winter you'd turn into a silly little flapper like your friend Mary. Whew! He gave an exaggerated sigh of relief and grinned at me. Come on, get to work and help us scrub. While we were scrubbing away, the electric bearing Grandpa came home to lunch. The electric bearing Grandpa home to lunch rolled up the drive and into the stable. Braun went to welcome Grandpa home. Freddie and I finished scrubbing the clams and carried them into the kitchen for Aunt Edith to steam. We had such a merry lunch. Grandpa was happy to see Braun, and he loved the steamed clams. He talked about his meeting and how well the ladies were working together on the bazaar, bean supper, fireworks display, and dance, which, as always, would be held at the church on July 4th. Grandpa described with gusto what kind of rockets would soar and burst above the steeple, the varieties of pinwheel that would spit gobbets of colored fire, and the enormous American flag that, to climax the show, would sizzle red, white, and blue while the high school band played the Star-Spangled Banner. The rest of us oohed and ahed, and Freddie got so excited that I guess he thought he would go up in a rocket. I guess he thought he could go up like a rocket. Anyway, he fell out of his chair. Nobody scolded him. We all laughed. Later, Braun teased Aunt Edith about not knowing enough geometry to teach it at the Sewell High School, which she was going to have to do in the autumn, along with Latin and American history, because she had given up what Braun called her plushy job in Boston, so she could stay at the Haven and look after Grandpa. He said such funny things, and Aunt Edith, I could hardly believe it, was just as funny answering him back. I thought she made snappier comebacks even than B.B. Daniels in the movies. She did an imitation of Cousin Harriet that had all of us, even Grandpa, in stitches. And then I did an imitation of Mary, imitating Clara Bow, that put everyone in stitches again. Braun laughed more than anyone. For me, at any rate, it was his being there and noticing me that made me feel so easy and happy and able to say clever things without worrying whether other people would think they were clever. I guess he made us all feel good. I had never seen Aunt Edith act so young and undignified. Grandpa talked about Grandma without even sighing, but as if she were out of the room for a minute and would be right back to join the fun. When we had sent Grandpa off for his nap, Braun asked why didn't we all go out for a sail in the catboat. I've painted and caulked her, he said to me, and put in a new centerboard. The old one was rusted out, but I've been too busy to try her out. The tide's coming in, and there will be a good breeze in the bay. Freddie and I said we were all set to go. Braun put his arm around Aunt Edith's waist as she stood at the sink. How about it, Edie? I know you're no great athlete like our Jerry here, but with us enthusiasts to urge you on, I bet you could learn to sail and enjoy it. After all, you're going to be a native Sewellian again. You can't go on acting like a landlubber. Aunt Edith patted Braun's hand at her waist, turned to smile at all of us, but shook her head. You're nice to ask me, Braun, but I guess I am just a landlubber and too old to change. She moved away from Braun to dry her hands at the roller towel on the shed door. I'd love to walk down to the cove with the rest of you and watch you set off. I'm not such a landlubber that I don't enjoy watching experts like you and Jerry handle a boat. But after I've watched you all sail away, I'll go on to the library and get some geometry books. Oh, God. That sounds awful. I'd rather go sailing. She turned to look straight at Braun. You're right about my not knowing much. Maybe you can help me. Maybe later we can work together on it in evenings the way we used to. She smiled and waited for Braun to answer her. I couldn't help noticing again how beautiful she was, especially now that she wasn't being brusque, but sort of hopeful and humble and anxious to please. No amount of Dagmar cosmetics would ever make me, or anyone else for that matter, as beautiful as she was. For a minute, I was afraid that Braun would change his mind about sailing and offer to go to the library with Aunt Edith. But he didn't. He muttered something vague about not knowing much geometry himself, stared at the floor for a minute, then shrugged and turned to Freddie and me. Get the sail and your sweaters and your bathing suits too if you like. You can change on Irene and have a swim when we get back. Step lively. At the cove, the tide was high and a breeze ruffled the water into lively wavelets. Water, sky, and our newly painted catboat were all bright and brisk and shiny. Only Irene, instead of her usual buttercup yellow, was painted a dismal black. I don't like it, said Freddie. She looks like a pirate ship. Braun sighed. I'm sorry, Freddie. You see, most women look their best in black, and I thought Irene would too. I realize now that I was wrong. Irene is the sort of girl who should only wear pastels. I bet you'll like her inside, though. She's prettier and more comfortable than ever. I'll show you around later. Braun rowed us out to the catboat in our skiff, and we all climbed aboard. From now on, said Braun, Jerry's skipper, Freddie's crew, and I'm passenger. He settled himself on a cushion amidships. I'm not going to do anything but enjoy myself. I'm thinking a catboat is a catamaran. Because I think he's mentioned the skiff, and the skiff is like just a little boat. Freddie and I raised the sail. I took the tiller and the sheet. Freddie cast us off. We waved to Aunt Edith, who stood on the road watching us. And she waved back. We beat our way down the river in a series of short tacks, but once we got into Sewell Harbor, we had wind and water to spare. I pointed the catboat in the general direction of Houghton Landing. To port, Gull Neck stuck out of the marsh like a pointing finger and extended south for 8 sandy, scrubby miles until it terminated in a pile of rocks topped by Gull Point Light and the Coast Guard station. Gull Neck served Sewell Harbor as a breakwater against the open Atlantic, and Gull Ledges, a series of sandbars studded with rocks extending into the harbor from about the midpoint of Gull Neck, were the only hazard to sailing there. Most of the time they were out of the water, and sometimes we went to them to look for the big sea clams that lay around on top of the sand and were especially good for chowder. For about an hour before and after high tide, the ledges were underwater and a hazard, but they were marked with a black marker. You had to be very ignorant or very stupid to run aground on them. To sail to Houghton Landing, you coasted inside Gull Neck, skirting the ledges until you came abreast of Gull Point Light. From there, you took a southeasterly course for about 5 miles of open ocean until you came under the lee of Houghton Heights and into the landing. The catboat nipped along on a reach with a steady east wind coming over the port side. I figured that with such a steady wind, we'd burn up the 5 miles of open ocean between Gull Point Light and Houghton Heights. We had time to sail to Houghton Landing, buy ice cream cones, and be back at the cove in time to swim before dinner. I had made this trip often with Grandma, starting when I was a very little girl, and the purchase of an ice cream cone was a big occasion for me. The ice cream sail, as I privately called it, still excited me. It does today in 1944. If we only had a sailboat, how I'd love to bundle the little boys in life jackets and take them on an ice cream sail, the way Grandma used to take me. We'll sail to Houghton Landing and buy ice cream cones, I said to Braun and Freddie. That is, if anyone has any money. Freddie had a nickel in his pocket, and Braun found 25 cents in his, which was just enough. We settled down for an afternoon sail. There are some questions I want to ask you and Freddie, said Braun. This is a good chance. He stretched out his legs. First, I've got to tell you about the afternoon before your grandmother died. And he told us in a general way what Aunt Edith had already described in detail in her narrative. I can't forget, said Braun, how hard she tried to tell us about that quilt, and we would have found it for her, too, if Dead-Eyed Dick hadn't interfered. Well, he looked inquiringly from Freddie to me. Did she ever say anything to either of you about a special quilt that was hidden somewhere? Freddie shook his head, but I remembered. There was a quilt. She said it was ugly as sin. Aha! Cried Braun. Tell me about it. She showed it to me last summer. She said that the year after Henry Hardin robbed the safe, she sulked in her room and pieced the quilt. It was ugly a sin, too. I fixed my eyes on Braun and shuddered. I wanted him to realize how ugly it was. It makes me sort of sick just to remember it. Go on, urged Braun. Did she say anything more? Yes, she did. And I remember it because it wasn't like the things she usually said. She said, I must look at it sometimes to remind myself of my sin from which there is no escape. Braun frowned and shook his head as if he could hardly believe what I had said to him. You're luffing, Jerry, shouted Freddie, and added a little peevishly, I don't see why you never told me about this. I took in the sheet. I never told anyone before. I don't like to remember it. Braun continued to frown. She told Edith and me, when we were young, about how she took to her room after Henry Hardin took off with all the money. She stayed there until her father died, and she had to come out to support her mother and herself. She never mentioned a quilt to us. I'm sure Edie doesn't know anything about it either. He paused. She must have kept it hidden somewhere. Do you know where? I shook my head. She brought it into my room just when we'd finished making my bed. She took it out to air it, and we looked at it, and she said what I told you, and then she took it away out of my room again. And you have no idea where she went to get it or put it again? Again, I shook my head. You're going to have to do better than that, Jerry, said Braun. You must remember something that will give us a clue. No, honest, I don't. Braun sighed, then smiled at me. I'm not going to let you off that easy. I'm going to try to make you remember more than you think you do. Change places with me and give me the tiller. I did as he told me. Now, he went on, when we were resettled, stare at something that has no meaning or interest to you, like a rib or a plank at the bottom of the boat, and try to remember as hard as you can to think back to yourself in that scene with your grandmother and the quilt. Try to remember every little thing, all the sights and sounds and smells that were around you, and that you usually don't even notice because they're always there, and the weather and the time of day and what you'd had to eat, and all the little gestures or movements that you and your grandmother made as you did what you were doing and what you were talking about. Your exact words if you can. As you remember the scene, tell it aloud to yourself and don't leave anything out. Maybe I'll notice something that you've overlooked. I didn't like giving up the tiller or the idea of forcing myself to remember, but for Braun, I was willing to try my best. We were in my bedroom at about 9 a.m, I began. Honestly, Braun, I don't remember what I'd had for breakfast. Never mind, said Braun, and he urged me on with a nod and a smile. It was a warm, sunny day toward the end of last summer. I was helping Grandma to make my bed and mop and dust. I said I loved my room and the furniture and even the funny old books, though I didn't much care about reading them. But most of all, I loved my shadow and sunlight quilt that Grandma had made especially for my bed. Grandma was bustling around with a dust cloth. She said she'd loved the room too much when she was a girl and it had been hers. She loved the room too when she had been a girl and it had been hers. She ran her hand over the quilt. It has 3,600 pieces in it, and she smiled, and I thought she looked proud. So 3,600 pieces. That's a lot for a log cabin, isn't it? So maybe she calls this a sunshine and shadow quilt, but I'm wondering if this is not actually I'm not sure if this is actually a log cabin, because I don't know, that seems like a lot. Druid has some intel for us. Oh, yeah. So, Robin said that she found several sellers on eBay selling America's Quilts. So that was the book that we had been reading, or we'd looked at, which was what we found out was written by Jackie Atkins and Mary Kay Waldvogel, put it together. So you also saw several selling The Secret of the Crazy Quilt. And did you buy one, or did you just, I wasn't clear because you mentioned that you found a copy of it for $8. And Druid says, a catboat is a sailboat characterized by a single mast positioned far forward in the bow and a single sail, a cat rig. They typically have a wide beam width and a shallow draft, how deep the hull sits in the water, and are often gaff rigged, though Bermuda rigs are also used. Catboats are known for their spacious cockpits and comfortable, roomy design. A gaff rig is a sailing rig characterized by a four-sided mainsail with the top of the sail controlled by a spar called a gaff. Okay. I think we're getting into halyards, and this is the stuff I hear them say on the below deck, and I don't really put two and two together that much. Okay. So, thank you for the intel, Druid. Okay. All right, so 3,600 pieces. Suddenly, she stopped smiling and looking proud. She gave me her dust cloth, and she said, I can't remember her words exactly, that there was another quilt she was going to show me. She told me to finish dusting while she went to get it. She went out and shut the door of my room behind her. It made a click and a thud. After that, it was very quiet. I didn't hear her steps going off in any direction, but I guess that it was because she was wearing her house slippers. I remember the smell of the dust cloth. I didn't like it. I went to the window to shake it out. At the window, I smelled arbor vitae and marsh and ocean, and maybe the petunias around the flagpole. Smells I like. I wished Grandma would hurry up with her quilt so I could go out and play. I saw the wisteria vines spreading out over the top of the porch. I saw the marshes stretching way off to the ocean, and some sky with seagulls swooping around. They were screeching at each other, the way they always are, but they were far off, and the screeching wasn't very loud, just a sort of rasping sound. I shook out the dust cloth and started wiping the window ledge. And I guess I was getting more and more impatient to go out, because once I mistook the rasping of the seagulls were making for the sound of my door opening. I jumped around, expecting to see Grandma coming in, but the door stayed shut. I started dusting my bureau. Wait, Braun interrupted. Are the hinges of your door rusty? Did they rasp when your grandmother went out the door and closed it? I don't think so. I just remember a click and a thud. If your door hinges didn't rasp, why would you mistake the rasping of the seagulls for the rasping of hinges? I don't know. I was hoping the door would open and Grandma would come back and that soon I could go out. The sound the seagulls were making reminded me of doors opening, I guess. And, well, I guess... Braun silenced me with a wave of his hand. The seagulls were in front of you, far away, outside your window, and you think the rasping sound you heard behind you, inside the house, that reminded you of a door opening on rusty hinges, was made by the seagulls? Well, yes, I did, Braun. At least I think. I caught you, Jerry. Braun's eyes glinted. You fooled yourself then. You're fooling yourself now, but you can't fool me. Your hearing and sense of direction are both excellent. But seagulls aren't ventriloquists. What you heard was the rasping of rusty hinges somewhere inside the house. He grinned. I just looked at him and shook my head to show I didn't understand. You've given me the clue, cried Braun. I have? Braun threw back his head and laughed. He looked terribly handsome, with his chin lifted and his hair flying back and shining in the sun. I was happy that I had done what he wanted me to, even though I wasn't sure what it was or how I had done it, or whether or not he was laughing at me. I thought we could look there, and I told Edie so, exclaimed Braun. But she said her mother would never hide anything she valued up there. It never occurred to either of us that she didn't value it, that she hated or feared it. Why? I wonder why. Braun's forehead puckered. He stared off at nothing and forgot he was sailing a boat. I grabbed the tiller, swung us into the wind just in time to avert an accidental jibe. Thanks, said Braun, coming to. We'll go right back and find it. Won't Edie be surprised? Freddie turned from his forward station. I wish, Braun, you'd tell me where the quilt is hidden. I still don't know. Braun chuckled and smiled at Freddie. Freddie always had a gentling effect on people, and I was glad he had asked. If I had asked, Braun might have thought I was dumb. The quilt is in the cupola on top of the haven, Fred. What Jerry heard were the hinges of that old roll-up ladder rasping. They must be rusty as anything. Your grandmother never allowed anyone up in the cupola. Can we climb the ladder and go up in the cupola with you, Braun, when you get the quilt? Sure. Oh, boy, cried Freddie. That's been one of my life ambitions. That's cute. Mine, too, shouted Braun. Ready about. Hard Ali.
hard Ali. That's sailing terms. And he brought the catboat around with a jerk. He had forgotten our ice cream sail, and he didn't seem to notice that the wind was rising and that strong gusts were hitting us abeam. He kept the sheet taut, even when the catboat heeled so that she took water over the lee side. I do know that when it heeling means turning to the side. I would never have dared to sail so close to the wind and gusts like that. Freddie and I sat as far out as we could over the windward gunwale. We were a little scared and we got soaked, but just the same, it was fun. When we got back to the river out of the wind, we hardly seemed to be moving, and Braun made me paddle to hurry us along. After we had tied up in the cove, we almost capsized the skiff. We were in such a hurry to get in it and get off. We even forgot all our gear and left it on board. And that is the end of that section. So next time, we will get into Edith's narrative. And it looks like Edith is going to talk about the Crazy Quilt, because that is what this first section of Edith's narrative is called. Very exciting! Several variations of sunshine and shadow. Okay. So this is Amish sunshine and shadow. Duh. Okay, so yeah, this is like a trip around the world. So it makes sense. Yeah, that there would be 3,600 pieces. I totally forgot about the Amish sunshine and shadow, because it looks so much like Trip Around the World. You just turn it the other way, it's Trip Around the World. All right, guys. Well, it's a little early, but I'm going to end there for today. I hope you enjoyed Mildred Johnstone. I have to say, I was really thrilled to find her, and I'm super interested in her, and I want to look and see if I can find more about her. So, all right. So this week is business as usual. Tomorrow, Jill and I move on in the main quilts book. So if you're following along there, we'll see you on YouTube, Quilt Nerding, 7 p.m. Eastern. And if not, or even if so, I'll see you back on Thursday. So, guys, have a fantastic week. As always, I appreciate you, and I'm so glad you're here. And, yeah, take care, and I'll see you soon.